Hi, everybody. Cindy and Sandy here, your two co-race directors for the Georgina Spring Fling, coming up in just about 10 and a half weeks now. So we're getting closer and we're getting excited, and we look forward to seeing all you guys at the start and the finish line on May 6th in Georgina. We wanted to talk today about specifically marathon training, and what you should be thinking about, some things to consider if you're planning on doing the Spring Fling Marathon on May 6th.
Right. So I think right now we were going to assume that most people are already doing some running and getting their training started. So we're just about 10 weeks out. Where should people be at this point, Cindy?
So the first thing that I think people should do, if they haven't already, is work backwards from race day and build out their long runs. So think about getting to 32 to 35K. Some people run a little further. I don't believe most people need to. 32 to 35K before you start your taper. And your taper would typically be 10 to 14 days for a marathon. So start 2 weeks out. Say, okay, I need to get to 35K by this day. How can I work my way backwards to make sure that I get there? Building in a safe way. So it's safe to build your long run between 10 and 25% per week. And keeping in mind, you also want to build your total run volume for the week by about that same amount. So a few calculations to make. So start at that 32 to 35, 2 weeks out from the race, work backwards so that you get there. Again, so that your weekly mileage and your long run mileage don't exceed 10 to 25% building each week. The other thing to think about is you don't want to actually build up every single week. So you do need to give your body a chance to recover on certain weeks. So Sandy and I coach endurance athletes, including runners, and we typically will build a plan with a 2 to 3 week build and then a 1 week recovery. So you'll look at where you're at now in volume, you'll look at where you need to be, and then you'll decide, okay, how can I plot in those recovery periods as well? Recovery periods, by the way, are not weeks off. So they're weeks where you drop your volume. So you'll drop your volume, drop your intensity by about 60% on those weeks. I will typically give someone a run on those weeks where the long run might actually have a little bit more intensity in it, but be a lot less mileage. So for example, if someone's running typically a 24, 25K build week, maybe I'll drop them down to a 16 and make it a progressive run, or give a couple of 3 to 5K pieces inside the run to help them work on giving an effort during that second part of the run. So different things you can think about as you're building that plan. Right now, athletes that I am currently working with that are working towards the Spring Fling Marathon or another marathon around the same timeline, they're at about 24 to 28K in a long run right now. That's where I think you would want to be. You'd want to be somewhere up in the 20s in volume in order to have time to build up to where you want to go and give yourself a chance to have a couple of long runs where you back off a bit and you work on adding in some of that intensity during that second half. The reason you want to think about doing that every so often is that people tend to hit the wall or have a hard time in a marathon around that 30, 32K. So if you do some runs with some effort during that last piece, you're teaching yourself how to work hard when you're tired. You're teaching your body how to get past some of that hard stuff during the second half of a run without actually having to go out and do a 42K training run. So that's one of the benefits there.
You're also working through some the mental part of it, right? So your body is getting used to the feeling like that, but also you're working through what happens when your brain gets there, and you're thinking, okay, well, how am I ever going to do this? Hitting the wall is physical as well as mental, and you want to have a couple of opportunities to test yourself and say, all right, here's my strategy for getting through it, whether I'm counting my footsteps or I'm repeating mantras in my head, that sort of thing. And the other thing too is making sure that you're testing out your nutrition, how you're going to carry your nutrition, how you're going to support yourself during that run, maybe how your shoes are performing in that long run, right? All these things are going to start to, you're not going to be able to understand that until you get into those longer distances and really test them out.
Yeah. And
So,
important there about mentally getting through something is we don't expect you to feel great on every single run. We hope that you feel great in your your key runs, so maybe your interval runs or your tempo runs. But there are some runs that are typically built into a plan where we know you're going to be tired. Your legs might feel like bricks. And those are also days to go out and show yourself, you know what, even though I don't feel perfect today, I can still do it. I can still achieve my goal. And you put that into your mental strength bank and you pull that out on race day as well.
Absolutely. So, talking about the other runs, what else are people doing during the week? So it's not just the long run. You've also got run volume during the week. How do those look?
So hopefully by now people have done some hill training, even though they're going to the spring fling, which is a pancake flat route, by the way. Hill training still builds strength in your hips, strength in your legs, durability in the legs. And by hill training, I mean like doing hill intervals, hill sprints, things like that. That would come before now. If you haven't done them, no problem. You can add them in, and it actually works very well to add them into the second half of a long endurance long run, for example, or even do a hilly run for like your aerobic or recovery runs during the week, just to add a bit of that durability in. If you're doing that, you wouldn't race up the hill. You know, if your goal is to run at 70% of your threshold, then you're going to run those hills at 70%, just like you will the downhill and the flat. So adding them into an endurance run rather than doing sprints. Your key runs at this point, typically I would put 2 of them in per week, maybe a Tuesday and a Thursday, depending on how someone's plan is working when they're doing their long run. One of them can be a tempo type run, running at half marathon effort or 10K effort. And then one of them can be an interval run, where as a marathon runner, you don't need to go out and run 100-meter or 200-meter intervals as fast as possible, but doing a lot of them at like a 5K effort with smaller recoveries can be helpful for someone that's training for a longer event like a marathon.
Mm-hmm. Let's talk about weather adjustment, just in case. I mean, we're still in winter and facing some winter coming up this week. So, how do you advise people to go ahead and deal with that?
Yeah, so I just, on my way here, heard that tomorrow we can expect 5 to 10 millimeters of ice on the road. So I
Yay.
would advise going on the treadmill. But some people don't have that. So you have to be flexible, right? Just like you would in the summer if it's going to be 40 degrees. Sometimes it's not possible to do what is prescribed for you or what you plan to do that day. So sometimes you really just have to back off and get the mileage in if you can. Sometimes it's possible to do. Maybe it's not icy, but it's very windy. And in that case, you're going to go by perceived effort rather than the actual pace. So, if I tell you to go do intervals at a 4-minute kilometer, and that's your 5K pace, but it's wind blasting at your face the whole time. Think about what that 4-minute kilometer would typically feel like for you and go at that effort instead. So making modifications like that is important.
Yeah, absolutely. So then also let's talk about taking care of your body during that training time. So it's not all about running. If you're only running, likely you're going to start to feel some niggles and some, flirting with injuries and that sort of thing. So what else are we doing in between the runs to help support that?
So Sandy and I, we prescribe a lot of strength training to our athletes. We believe there's a lot of value in strength. Before now, so again, we're 10 weeks out right now. In the base period that would come before this conversation, we'd have you in the gym doing bigger exercises like squats, lunges, things like that, leg presses, stuff to get your hips and your legs really strong. At this point, you're going to be running quite a bit. You're not going to be wanting to further fatigue your legs and make them sore at this point between those runs. So right now, we want you to continue doing it, but the focus would be more on core strength. And core strength doesn't mean doing a whole bunch of sit-ups, by the way. It means like stability exercises like planks and side planks and bird dogs, dead bugs, exercises that hold your core steady and stable, where you might be just holding a position or you might be moving your limbs while holding that position. And then doing more functional exercises, like maybe you put a band around your legs and walk sideways to keep your glutes strong. Maybe do clamshells, for example, one leg squats, one leg deadlift type exercises, things that keep your hips working so that we don't have anything shut down or become inhibited on us, keep things balanced, but don't actually fatigue them. The best time to do those would be another question. So when you're at this point in your training, you don't want to be fatiguing your legs every single day. So I would not put that on a day you're not running. I would assume at this point you're running 4, 5, some of you even 6 days a week. I think 5 is a good number for most of us. I would put those strength workouts actually later in the day on one of your key run days, because you're wanting to keep your body together when you're fatigued. So let's say we go out, we do a tempo run on Thursday morning. Thursday evening, I might pull up my band, pull up my mat, do the core strength and the functional exercises to make sure that when I'm tired, I can still use these muscles and I can still remain stable. So that's how I would do that at this point in the year.
That's really great to know, because often we see in the program and we don't really know when to do it or why. So that's a good explanation of why we're doing it that way.
Yeah.
What about stretching and things like yoga?
You talk about that. You're the master of that.
It's the easiest thing to overlook, stretching. Mobility and stretching. I always like to say, do your mobility work beforehand, before your run, just to get your joints and your everything all moving and warmed up as part of your warm up. And you can stand there and do that while you're waiting for your run buddies to show up, right? Stretching afterwards is important, either right after your run to do some of that core stuff like quad stretching and hamstring stretching, calf stretching, all those sort of things, just to help loosen things up just after your run. But later on in the day, getting that yoga mat out and doing some really gentle stretching just to keep your body, flexible. Not too flexible, obviously. You're not turning into a gymnast, but you want to make sure that you're getting those muscles stretched out a little bit to help unravel the knots that happen. And stretching can also involve foam rolling and any kind of muscle or soft tissue work to make sure that any of those knots that are starting to build up, any of those adhesions that are starting to happen, can get stretched out. So rolling out your calves, really important, your hamstrings, your quads, your hips, in all of that, just to make sure that you're not letting things get tight and starting to inhibit. You want that muscle to be able to stretch out like an elastic and not pull like a rope.
Mm-hmm.
So let's talk about logistics, things like fueling and what you're wearing and shoes and things like that. So a lot of people don't really like to carry fuel on a run. At what point in a long run is it really important? When do you advise your athletes to start carrying hydration and fuel?
I think there's a little bit of variation person to person, but anytime you're running longer than an hour, you need to take in some fluid. And backing up, if you're doing an interval run that's 40 or 45 minutes, you might need fluid as well. I think that fluid needs to become electrolyte drink whenever you get over that hour mark. And by the way, we have Gatorade on course this year. So all of our races will be fueled by Gatorade this year, which I know a lot of people had asked for in the past. And we worked hard to bring that to you. So that'll be on course for you. And hopefully that helps you out with your training as well, because you do want to train with what you're going to use on race day.
Absolutely.
What I like to do myself is when I'm doing a run, I have my Garmin that beeps every time I go 1 kilometer. So that to me is a reminder of, oh yeah, I need to now take a couple of sips of my Gatorade or my water, whatever it is I'm doing that day. So make sure that you take it at regular intervals after that, or at that point. And me saying after that point brings me back to, if you're doing a 90-minute or 2-hour run, you don't start drinking at an hour. If you're doing a workout over an hour, start taking it right from the beginning. So right when that first kilometer starts to beep, take a couple of sips. And make sure that you do that. Make sure that you get used to that, get used to taking in those calories, that sugar, so that it's not something brand new for your body to handle on race day. Helps you get through your runs, but also helps you recover so that you can do your run the next day and feel decent.
Right. And also with gels, if you're using gels to help support your run, they every one before and then every 45 minutes, I think, is what they typically will put on the package. Does that work out in your experience?
Yeah, for the most part, for most people that can work out. If you're a bigger person, you might take them every half hour. If you're a smaller person, every 45, 50 minutes might be okay. So it's important to practice, to try to see what works for you, see what your body can handle. We're never going to take in more calories than we burn in an hour of running. So we don't have to worry about that. That being said, our bodies can only digest so much per hour while running. And that number is typically between 60 and 90 grams. So we don't have to confuse everyone by going into all those numbers, but you want to take in what you can take in and absorb and use without causing yourself some stomach distress.
Yeah, GI issues on a run in a marathon. I've been there, and I know that
Yeah.
that's not an experience you want to repeat.
Yeah. So practice, practice, practice. That
Absolutely. Yeah.
is for race day.
Yeah. Yeah,
So
exactly.
we
Um, we're going to have different kind of weather. We don't really know May 6th what we're going to have. We've had it be really hot. We've had it be cold. We'll deal with those kinds of questions as we get closer to the race and understand, what it's going to look like. But one of the things we haven't talked about is we've been talking about marathon primarily, but we also have a half marathon. We have a 10K. We have a 5K. So how would you say things are different for people training for those distances? Do they disregard everything we've been talking about?
The difference is, so we talked about building up to 32 to 35K for a marathon. For a 5K, a 10K, you're probably going to train longer than you race. Okay. So if it's your first ever one, you may not need to. But if you're training to improve, training to go, faster than you have before at those distances, you'll actually train quite a bit longer than your race actually is. So that's one difference. Your intervals will be harder. So instead of doing them at 5K pace, you might do a bunch of intervals at your best sustainable effort with more recoveries. That type of thing will be different. I think one thing that's important to point out is that for many of us, whether we're doing the 5, the 10, the half marathon, or the marathon, for many of us, it's our first race of the year. Some of us might get out and do something earlier, but for many of you out there, it's going to be your first race of the year. So keep that in mind. Make sure that you have practiced. Make sure that you have done some race effort intensities so that it's not all new. Make sure you've tried your clothes that you plan on using on race day. You've tried your Gatorade. You've tried your gels. Nothing is new. As Sandy said, we don't know the weather forecast. We hope it's a perfect day, 16 degrees, no wind. But we don't know. So it would be prudent to do a bit of training in a hotter situation. Get out there on the colder days, get yourself used to a variety of different conditions so that your body won't be shocked when you come to May 6th.
Mm-hmm. Or you just won't be psyched out. If you are a fair weather runner and you don't go out if it's raining or something like that, you might want to rethink that. And that's part of the mental strength that you're building, the resiliency.
Yeah.
And you may find that actually running in the rain, to me, that's my favorite time, is running in the rain. I don't know why. I've just always enjoyed it. But teaching yourself to be able to handle that so that on race day you have fewer things to worry about or be nervous about, and you can go out and enjoy it.
Yep.
Because that's why we're doing it in the first place, right?
Yeah. We wanted to mention too that in the past, in our past events, we've had some self-serve aid stations, we've called them, where you can actually leave your own fuel. Since bringing Gatorade on board, we are still going to have one self-serve aid station rather than two. So for those of you that still like to bring your own fuel, or maybe don't want to carry it all the way, we will still have one aid station where you can leave your own stuff. And that's going to be at the marathon turnaround right at De La Salle Park. So if you're doing the marathon, it's 2 loops of the course. You'll be able to leave your own fuel at that turnaround at the start finish line. And we'll give you more details on how that's going to work if you haven't raced with us before and done that before, should you want to use that.
Yeah. And I found that a lot of people actually put in things like an extra pair of socks or salt tablets, or just things that they thought they might need, but maybe not, and they didn't want to carry it. And that was whatever you're leaving there, we can't guarantee that you're going to get it back. Maybe because it's at De La Salle Park, if you think to stop by afterwards and see if you didn't pick it up, it's still there. But some people want to discard a jacket or something like that if the weather changes. So that might be the place where it's a safe dropping point, because it's just right outside the park turnaround for the marathon.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So thank you guys for watching. We hope that you learned something. We will be back in a couple of weeks with some more information that might be exciting or important or good to knows for race day. We will post all these on our YouTube channel, Endurance Event Productions, and then we'll post them to our Facebook pages as well. So you'll be able to see them and share them if you think that there's something useful in here that your friends would like to know as well. We welcome that, and we look forward to seeing all of you in Georgina on May 6th.
Yay.
Have
Happy
a great
training,
day.
everybody.